Hello and welcome to 365 Days of Healing. We're going to talk about stillness, which takes us into meditation and then observation. So if we think about stillness and we think about space, it is the time in our lives that we are just being. We're doing absolutely nothing. Is that possible? We have an automatic system within us that keeps our heart beating, and we breathe automatically, and a whole lot of processes happening automatically within this system. But that's not the stillness that I'm thinking of, although that becomes part of it. Because when we still our mind, when we try to change the frequency within our brain, and we go into a slower frequency and a wave pattern within the brain that we can actually measure, and we quieten down the thoughts, and that also then is a feedback system for this autonomic part of ourselves, which is to do with our breathing, our blood pressure, the hormone releases, and any other activities that are happening organically within us. So stillness takes us into a different pattern of life force, is the best way I can put it. And there's the benefit in that, because if we can find space to be still in each day, we give our bodies quiet time, we give our bodies rest and rejuvenation. Now, of course, that's what happens when we sleep, but sleep is something that happens where we go very deeply into a different brainwave again, and the patterns of those brainwaves change up and down depending on what stage of sleep we're in. But we're not consciously doing that when we're asleep. So what I'm asking you to do is to start investigating the stillness when you are still conscious, in other words, when you are still awake, when you are in what we call a meditative mode. So when we meditate, we actually slowing the thoughts down, we're just observing the passing thoughts, and we are stopping that emotional response that comes from our thoughts, and we are actually even trying to stop the thoughts from happening. And so we're looking for the space. Now, the best way I can explain space is if I take a room, say, and I look at 4 walls in a room. Now, some of those walls might have doorways or windows in them, but the part between the 4 walls is space, and it's the space actually that creates the room with the walls. So if we look at our mind the same way, and we think about our mind as being the walls and the windows and the doors as part of our mind self, and then we focus instead on the space between the thought, then we have got to the place where we can just be in stillness. Because in the space between walls, there is actually nothing in a room. And that's an interesting phenomena, that how can that be that is actually what creates the room? So what creates the thought? What, say, if I give you another analogy, what creates music? The notes themselves are a part of it only. They are there and we play the notes, but it is the space between the notes that creates the music. It's not just the notes, because if you just had the notes running together, it would just be a cacophony of sound. It is the space between the notes that create the music, and then how hard or how softly we play the notes, and what tempo, how quickly then we play the notes to each other. But even no matter how quickly we play the notes, it's the space between the notes that actually create the music. So if we think about that, if we look at our own bodies and we think about the cells, and we look at a cell under a microscope, there is more space in the cell than there is matter. And so this gives us some clues. If we look at nature, it's the space between that creates what nature is. And so if we bring that into our lives, if that's the clue out there around us, how can we bring that into our lives so that our lives are not just being driven by our mind chatter or by our conditioning or by any other influence outside of ourselves? If we can stop the mind chatter, if we can slow the brain waves down, if we can consciously prepare ourselves to go into a place of stillness and to look at the space between the thought, is then where we can start connecting to different dimensional understandings. It brings us peace of mind. It helps our immune system to respond to its highest degree of efficiency that it is able to. It actually reduces pain. And these things have been measured. We know that if we can still the mind, and if we can stop the explosion of reactions that happen in our bodies because of what is happening in our mind, it actually allows us to work at our optimum level. The same as if we overload a cell with water, say, the cell does not function at its optimum level. Or if we don't give the cell enough water, it does not work at its optimum level. And so it's finding the balance between stillness and doing, or being and doing. So when we go into that meditative space, there are many different ways of working meditation so that it helps us go into stillness. We can do it, say, with walking meditation. We can go out into nature and we can observe things around us. We can, say, observe the space between leaves on a tree, branches. We can look at different shapes and patterns and all sorts of things that help us to still the intense brain waves that say happen when we are motivated to the fright or flight order of survival. So a walking meditation where we're just in observation of our surroundings, and that helps us to still the mind chatter. We could use visualization. We can visualize going to a very special place, a place that means a lot to us, where we just feel peaceful and calm, where the sounds, say, in the background allow us to calm our minds, where we can observe in that special place the things there that help us to stay in a place of balance and calm. Or we can look at our emotional self and realise that our emotions are just there as survival mechanisms. They don't have to order who we are, say. Some of us attach to our emotional self, thinking that that's who we really are. But is it who we really are? Or are they just energy in motion to allow us to recognize that we may need to change how we're patterning our behaviors and our thoughts to bring us back to center and back to balance. So when it feels like, when you're in that meditative state, when you're in that place of stillness, when it feels like nothing is happening, is when you're right on the point of being in deep meditation. Very often when you're saying to yourself, but there's nothing happening, no, this isn't working, is the very point, paradoxically, when it is starting to begin for you, where you are in the space between our breaths is the place of meditation. The space, everything is made up of as much space as what it is matter. In fact, there is more space than matter in our world. And if we start recognizing that, we then have the ability to stay in a balanced world and in a balanced emotional response to what is going on around us. So look for the stillness in your life. Give yourselves permission to be still, to do nothing. And when you feel that you're doing nothing, know that that's the very time that you're on the cusp of deeper understanding and insight. So find the stillness within, and that will bring balance and optimum health and well-being. Namaste, my friends.